Do you have a passport? If you do, have you ever wondered how powerful it is? I don't mean generally in the sense of, wow, this document allows me to travel to other countries and also serves as ID for buying alcohol. I mean power in the sense of what gives passports power, and how do we define that? So today, let's figure out what makes these documents so powerful, what's the best one to have, and what are the intricacies of passport power. In the early 20th century, global travel, especially in Europe, was transforming rapidly. Some countries wanted to put more controls on who could and could not visit. In 1920, a global passport standard was proposed by the League of Nations, the predecessor to the UN. Shortly after, the United States passed an act to create the US's first passport controls and limit the number of immigrants that could arrive from certain countries. The reason for those American laws, as one congressman put it, he wanted to limit the influx of immigrants who posed a threat to the ideal of American hegemony, aka racism. And this moment led to the later widespread idea globally of the illegal immigrant. Foreshadowing for later in this video, some people were viewed as being better or more trustworthy depending on where they were from, and therefore could access more parts of the world itself. And this issue of gatekeeping, and often racism, would continue to be a problem around the world, not just in the United States. The idea of passports and passport controls would spread globally. Now, in the 21st century, pretty much every country issues passports and accepts a passport anywhere as a valid form of ID. Perhaps the only real exception is North Korea, which does not take passports as ID, and also still issues exit passports. And they are one of the few countries that still doesn't issue biometric passports. See, most passports nowadays contain data such as your fingerprint stored in them. There's an international standard for both biometric and non-biometric passports. To put it shortly, the biometric version is more expensive for a country to produce than a non-biometric one, but it's typically valid for 10 years. The non-biometric versions are cheaper but are only valid for 5. The biggest perk for biometric passports as far as border controls go is that they have electronic information embedded in them, meaning that as long as a border checkpoint is equipped to handle them, the process is vastly quicker and easier than with a non-biometric version. At times, it can be as simple as scanning at a kiosk and getting a receipt and going. Now, if you manage to somehow get a North Korean passport, you'll only be able to easily travel to 40 different countries, and it's only these 10 that you could visit visa-free. There are 199 places in the world that you can travel to. Pretty much all of them issue passports. And that number includes places such as Macau, Taiwan, and Palestine, which issue their own passports despite their disputed status. Going back one more time to the North Korean passport, let's look at that 40 number. More often than not, that's what's used to determine passport power. Specifically, that's what the Henley and Artin passport indexes use to define it. And sometimes, depending on sources available and how recent their data is, that number varies between the two of them. Now, a lot of people will want to define that strictly based on where you can go visa-free. For those not in the know, a visa is a document issued by a foreign country that lets you stay there for a set amount of time. This is where passport power affects a major part of travel. Passport privilege. Though we'll go into this more later, put simply, passport privilege is how much access you have to the world around you and how easy is your travel experience, just based on where you're from and where your passport is issued from. Again, this simplifies it a bit, but it's a basic gist, and yes, this means a lot of people can and will be treated differently while traveling just based on where they're from. Going into passport power more, let's look at the Faultline team's passports.
You all good, Jamie, on your end?
Yeah, I'm all good.
Okay, cool.
I have a British passport, Jamie has an American passport, and once her Lithuanian citizenship by descent application is approved, she will have dual citizenship. And Aparna has an Indian passport. So let's dive into how powerful these passports are. And for context, these are from comparing numbers from both the Henley and Artin passport index. Beginning with Aparna, the Indian passport is currently the 87th most powerful in the world. According to Henley, the passport allows for entry into 60 countries visa-free, with Artin giving a power number of 72. Though Henley says there are 60 visa-free destinations, Artin says that only 23 countries allow visa-free travel on an Indian passport, and 49 will grant a visa on arrival.
Aparna, what happens when you travel?
Do you always need a visa?
Yeah, if I have to travel somewhere, what about the visa? That's the first question. It never ever goes independent from each other. So whenever I see these Instagram reels by travel bloggers or influencers, some of the most popular ones are, here are the countries that Indian passports can take you without visas. And that's true because we're all super desperate because nobody has the time to still plan shit out. So yeah, I've seen and I've noticed a lot of privilege that comes with it.
Heading into Jamie's passports, and sticking with Arten's numbers, the American one has a passport power of 172. 115 countries can be visited visa-free, and an additional 57 will be granted a visa on arrival. The Lithuanian one is less powerful technically. 169 countries with 120 visible visa-free, and 49 that will grant a visa on arrival. However, you could argue that the Lithuanian one is more powerful than the US passport, in the sense that it grants access to the EU Schengen area, as it's part of the European Union. As somebody holding that passport, Jamie will be allowed to live and work in any of these highlighted countries for an unlimited amount of time. You will be able to live in Germany or any other EU country without too much red tape.
Not just any EU country, but even EEA countries that aren't in the EU. So let's say like we move to Germany and I decide that, maybe great trains are worth paying 25 euros for a burger and we go to Switzerland. Or, maybe we decide we want to go to Denmark because that's where a lot of my family's from. We can do that without any hassle.
Which mine now does not. Thanks to a certain referendum, guess what I don't have access to anymore. However, despite that, the UK passport is still rather powerful, with a score of 169. Around the same as Lithuania. That means I can travel to 116 different countries visa-free, and an additional 53 will be granted a visa on arrival. For those curious, the weakest in the world is the Afghanistan passport. When it comes to visa-free travel, the easiest possible option for those with Afghan passports only gets access to 4 small nations. On the other end of the spectrum, we have 2 different contenders for the best passport. Japan or Singapore has the best passport. Singapore allows you to travel to 128 countries visa-free, and including visas on arrival, that jumps to 168. In the case of Japan, you only get 119 countries visa-free, but with visas that jumps to 171. Oddly enough, beating out both of these according to the Arten Passport Index is the UAE. Though it's lacking in pure visa-free travel, with visa on arrival schemes the number jumps to 175. Though if we're going strictly based on visa-free travel, Singapore wins according to both indexes. Great job, you've won a visa-free trip to watch the video that we did on Singapore a few months back. Travel is so much more complex than just getting a passport and hopping on a plane. There may be visa processes, bureaucracy, even racial profiling, as has often been the issue with border security agents. And sometimes things get rather tricky with travel documents. As it turns out, some passports, particularly those from the EU and the EEA, have perks such as being able to move freely throughout the entire Schengen area. Visa-free travel is good, but imagine being able to travel to different places without a passport, without even a formal border crossing at all. That's the perks of agreements such as the EU Schengen area or the US Compact. Of course, there is another side to this. Even if you have a seemingly powerful passport, if trouble strikes whatever country you're from, there's no guarantee you'll get help from other countries, even if they have a valid visa or valid passport in hand. For example, post 9/11, the United States government gained much global controversy for both ramping up airport security through their Travel Safety Association organization, that's the TSA for short, and for instituting a no-fly list for certain passengers. The TSA in particular is known for randomly selecting passengers, more often than not those with traditional Muslim-sounding names or who appear not to be WASPy, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. As for the do not fly list, this was a list of names given to airports of people not allowed to board flights into or out of the United States, either due to unruly behavior or ties to terrorist activities. People are put on this list without warning, and often don't find out if they're on it until they reach an airport and are turned around. And some of the people who are turned around are either on the list wrongfully or merely just share the name with somebody else on the list and have troubles flying due to mistaken identity. That's not to mention the countless other other issues experienced at airports and border crossings across the world. In the wake of 9/11, prejudice towards Muslim people rose. Just take a look at this chart that shows how people were treated in Western countries. Often people have been turned away no matter their passport just because a border agent simply thought, yeah, not today. To recap, passports in the modern sense are a fairly new invention, at least how they're used globally, and in theory have a lot of perks. In reality, some countries use them as a form of profiling and control, and some countries are increasingly wanting to move past the ideas of passports as we know it. I guess to sum up passports in brief, well, it's complicated.